A shocking moment caught on camera as a high school student violently attacks a teacher. On Tuesday, the Kalamazoo Central High School student apparently jumped on the teacher's back, putting him into a headlock. Police haven't said what caused this attack. Luckily, no one was seriously injured.
This kid was reckless and very intimidating.
It was November 14th when two students burst into the East High School classroom of English teacher Keith Rawling. They wrestled, one cursed at Rawling and threatened him.
I tried to get in between them, just physically break up the commotion.
He managed to get one student out the door, but as the teacher walked back into his classroom to call security, watch what happened.
Oh my God!
The 15-year-old boy who had been kicked out of the class returned, picked Rawling up, and body slammed him.
Out of nowhere, I was off of my feet into the ground within 2 seconds. It was very scary.
Rawling is among 22 teachers or counselors who have filed grievances over the way the district has disciplined students who physically or verbally assaulted teachers.
Teachers being body slammed to the floor by a student, teachers being headbutted, punched, kicked.
Pat Shipe, president of the Teachers Union, believes the district is failing to follow the Code of Student Behavior and the contract between the board and the union. Concern over discipline was one reason Akron teachers walked out on strike in 1989 for 9 days. But after it was settled, the contract was changed. Shipe says proven physical assaults call for expulsion and a mandatory transfer to another school. And proven verbal assaults should result in a suspension or expulsion and a transfer.
The majority of the students that we're seeing are being returned not only to the building where the assault occurred, but in some cases to the same classroom.
Frustrated.
In Rawling's case, the body-slamming student was charged by police with assault and transferred to another school, but wasn't expelled, as stated in the teacher's contract.
In certain situations, I don't feel as safe as I did prior because things like this have happened to me and seems like they could continue to.
Superintendent David James acknowledges that student should have been expelled, but says the building's principal failed to provide crucial video evidence in the boy's hearing.
Try to provide it outside of the hearing. Legally, it should be presented in the hearing because parents have a right to see the evidence against their child.
The teacher says there are many more examples. A first grader punched a pregnant teacher in the stomach, but remained in the class.
The student had another meltdown, did the same thing, came at the teacher, in this case headbutted her, punched her in the stomach.
I definitely took it as, physical intimidation.
And this counselor at Kenmore Garfield High School says a student who got in his face last year and said, "You're gonna have a problem," was sent to another school, only to be brought back this year.
It's detrimental, him coming back into that building. I took it a little bit as a personal and professional affront.
James didn't recall the case of the pregnant teacher punched, but pointed out in some cases assaults are committed by kids with special needs. He also said the district can't preordain punishment, it's case by case.
They believe that if a principal recommends an expulsion, we should just rubber stamp it. But we do have that legal process that kids are afforded by federal law.
And in some cases, the district disagrees that an assault happened.
In their contract, verbal assault is so wide, you could call a teacher a cabbage head and that could be a verbal assault.
Both sides agree it's a small percentage of Akron's 20,000 students causing the problems. But these teachers also say the district never hears about many classroom assaults.
If we reported every incident, myself included, that could constitute a verbal assault, there'd be more than they could ever deal with.
We've done so many stories about black violence against teachers in the classroom. So many stories about the denial, deceit, and delusion surrounding it. We've even done a lot of stories where when a teacher goes to the principal to complain about the amount of violence in his classroom or to talk about a specific example of black violence directed at him, the teacher ends up getting fired because he cannot control his classroom. That's what happened here in Battle Creek, Michigan. This guy was a lifelong teacher. After he retired, he became a substitute teacher in Battle Creek. Over a 3-week period, he had to ask one of the black students to leave the class 15 times. Every episode of getting removed from the class always involved cursing, threats, and lots of other things. Finally, after removing the kid 15 times, the kid attacked him, hurting him severely. The school district said that the teacher, the substitute teacher, caused the violence with his sarcasm. Here's what the teacher said happened. He would curse at me. I would say, "Thank you very much. There you go again, being profane and obnoxious." Or, "Thank you very little." They figured the sarcasm to them incited them, which I don't buy. What other tool does it, end quote, what other tool does a teacher have? He got fired for this. By the way, we've done several stories on this. Every single time a teacher takes that to court, they win. Every once in a while, somebody does a study about this violence in classrooms. They say it's going up, and they say, well, we don't know what we're going to do about it. Education Week magazine did a big story this week. When students assault teachers, effects can be lasting. And they tell us one story after another of a student attacking a teacher, student using profanity against a teacher, a student threatening a teacher over and over and over. It's not an isolated incident, says this magazine. 5.8% of the teachers, 5.8% of the 3.8 million teachers were physically attacked, and 10% were threatened. Here's where it gets good. But for the most part, teacher victimization has been an understudied and underpublicized area, experts say. We've done more on this than anybody else in the country, period. Over and over and over and over. But the weird thing about it is the teachers, of course, and the teachers' unions, who control the school boards, they are down with the cause. And so to complain about this enormous amount of black violence, criminality, and hostility directed at them in the classroom is basically to go to your union and say, oh yeah, everything we believe, everything our partners inside the Democratic Party believe, everything is one big fat lie. So let's change that. No, nobody's buying into that. Instead, what they buy into is the story that black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything, especially why white teachers are always picking on black kids for no reason whatsoever. Done lots of stories on the book Courageous Conversations, where a guy named Dr. Glenn Singleton, he has a company, makes a lot of money going around the country teaching white teachers how to teach black students. And the first thing you have to do in that course, in that seminar, is to have a courageous conversation where you have to be brave enough to admit that your white racism is responsible for this enormous level of black criminality and black hostility and black dysfunction in schools. So if you want to know why black students are suspended 3, 5, 10, 20 times more, expelled 3, 5, 10, 20 times more, and why their academic performance is also light years behind white students and Asian students, we only have to go to one place only, and that is white racism. This is the dominant ideology in our schools all over the country today. This ideology was nurtured and grown and institutionalized by the gang in the Obama administration during an 8-year period, which came to a culmination in the middle of that 8 years when they issued their executive order. Obama issued an executive order called Excellence in African American Education, which talks about all these things. It talks about white racism. It talks about black students being suspended. It talks about black students being criminalized in school for no reason whatsoever. Let's get back to this article. It's a tough thing to study, said a professor of psychology at the University of Florida. No one wants to talk about that teaching is a hazardous profession, that teachers are at risk when they are in the classroom. New research offers some insights on the teachers who are being attacked and what those incidents can mean long term. A recent study by somebody in Missouri, Francis Wang, Huang, he analyzed all this federal data And he found that female teachers were more likely to be attacked than male teachers. Teachers in okay, here comes like the one sentence that that contains or hides a mountain of information. Teachers in school with higher percentages of non-white students and higher levels of poverty were more likely to report being threatened or attacked, but Wong said the data didn't shed any light on the demographics of the students who attacked teachers. Okay, so every college has Department of Education where they train teachers to teach, right? Everybody, there's a lot of research going on. And all the research now is being focused on how do we identify this mountain of white racism that is being directed at these defenseless black students? That is the subject of every single bit of research being done in colleges all over the country. Anybody that goes into their department chair and say, hey, do you suppose we could do a study and to see if there's anything to this, all these crazy videos that Colin Flaherty keeps posting about black students in schools attacking teachers? He gets hundreds of letters from teachers. He posts hundreds of videos about thousands of examples. We can't find any really stories of white students attacking teachers. So do you think we can study that? What do you suppose would happen to that person's career who proposed that kind of study? Well, we already know what would happen. They would be fired. They would be denied tenure. They wouldn't get published. It would be suggested maybe they'd be happier in a different profession. If you're in one of those Glenn Singleton seminars, courageous conversations, and you raise your hand, and I cover this a lot and don't make the black kids angry. If you raise your hand and go, well, Dr. Singleton, I'm not really sure about what you're saying there because I really don't feel like I'm a racist. Those teachers are not hired back. Their contracts are not renewed. All over the country, the teachers' union representatives in the state legislatures, the people who run teachers' unions, also have enormous influence in Democratic state legislatures. They're reminding people that, well, if we arrest black people for committing violence in schools, that's just going to criminalize them. And we happen to know that arresting a child for committing a crime, well, that will hurt the child in the long run. And so in Minnesota, I'm quoting from the article here, they're putting their energy toward promoting restorative practices to handle student discipline. Restorative practice is an increasingly popular approach in schools that says students need to take responsibility for their actions, parentheses, not true, and work to right a wrong rather than be punished under zero tolerance policies. Quote, restorative practice, in its simplest form, says that hurt people. People who are hurt people, said Becky McCammon, the restorative practice program coordinator for the St. Paul Federation of Teachers and the St. Paul District. In one elementary school, she said, this means when a student's emotions begin to run high, he or she can go to the school's green room to take a break and de-escalate the budding conflict. There they can do yoga, use a punching bag, and there's a school leader who's trained in restorative practice they can talk with. You know, NPR did a big story on this, like an hour's worth, and for the first 45 minutes, they were all down with this. And they spent a long time in this school where they do this. It was a black school and lots of violence, and every time there was some kind of violence or hostility or threat to the teacher or to other students, the teacher would say, okay, Johnny, could you please go down to the restorative justice room? And if there was another kid involved, say one guy's beating up another guy, or just as likely that the young ladies are going to do it in these circumstances, you put the predator in the same room with the victim and they talk it out. That's a nightmare scenario. Oh yeah, here's how the NPR story ended. So for 45 minutes, it was all restorative justice, how everybody, all these white liberals are explaining to us very patiently how they're going to take these black children and put them in classrooms face to face. Everybody's going to sing Kumbaya, hooray! Anyway, at the end of this hour-long podcast called This American Life, they go on a field trip. So, they hop on a subway on the way to their field trip, and of course, a large episode of black mob violence breaks out, and there happened to be a plainclothes cop on the train. He came in and tried to break it up. They attacked him. Of course, all the teachers involved at the school who were not there were pretty sure that that cop had caused the violence by attacking his students for no reason whatsoever. Even NPR kind of gave that a little bit of the fisheye. But on and on it goes. Where this is going to stop, nobody knows. The thing about schools, too, is a lot of the stuff they do is a secret. It's protected by our child whatever laws. They don't release names. They don't release this. They don't release that. But they cannot stop teachers from writing us letters that we publish, that we're going to publish more and more often. I'm putting together in a book called It's Not Our Fault, You Can't Fight, of teachers' personal experiences with black violence and hostility in classrooms. Can't stop those teachers from telling us what is going on. Do you know a teacher? Ask them what's going on. I was with a teacher a few nights ago among some people in my hood. This teacher is actually in charge of discipline at her school. It's one chocolate nightmare after another. I used to talk to Marlon Newburn about this a lot. He was actually the principal of a school for children with challenged behavior during his 30-year career. He did that for 4 years. He was also a court-appointed psychologist, and he was also a prison psychologist. Anyway, he told me the same thing lots of other teachers told me. If you're a teacher, you pick up the phone to call the parent, and you say, hey, Mrs. Smith, yeah, Jamal, we had a little trouble with Jamal in school today. Do you suppose you can come down for a parent-teacher conference? The parent, without exception, is going to say one of two things. One, I dropped him off. He's your effing problem. Yeah, the obscenity is part of the 100%. And or the second thing they say, and or is, you're just picking on my child because he is black. I don't know who's going to be the one to bell the cat on a national level. I don't know who's going to be the one to look at all the black schools and say, there's an enormous amount of violence and hostility in these schools, and we've been making it worse by tolerating it. We've been making it worse by focusing on the predator and ignoring the victim. And as a result, we have 16 high schools in Baltimore, black high schools, where not one single person can read or write above a third grade level. Translation, they can barely read an emoji. And now this month, February, in schools, this is the most dangerous month for a white child who goes to school with black students because it's Black History Month. All month, the children are learning this institutional racial resentment that white people are picking on black people for no reason whatsoever. They've been doing it for 4 years, 40, 400, 4,000, 4 million, 4 billion years. And that's why your life is so screwed up. It's because of that white kid sitting right there. Yeah, him. What do you think happens to those white kids in the hallways and the stairwells and the bathrooms? We already know the answer to that. They're victims of ridiculous levels of violence and hostility, and all the teachers can do. Yeah, the same teachers that are being victimized by this. All the principals can do is shrug their shoulders and go, well, you're going to have to learn how to deal with it, because if we dealt with it and suspended violent and hostile people who are destroying this school, who have destroyed this school, if we did that, that would make a lot of black kids angry.